for us to have a moment of silence before the serenity prayer for Jenny V., who is one of our members out of our Friday night group who lost her husband 2 weeks ago. So keep her in your prayers. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. I'd like to start just with a unison reading of the 12 steps, if you have them with you. If not, I'm going to read them. 1. We admitted we were powerless over the addict and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and thorough moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continue to take personal ownership, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. It's my pleasure to give you a very brief introduction to our speaker this afternoon. We have Lois P. with us, who is, at least for those of us in the Raleigh area, has the distinction of having been in the program since 1971. For those of us who've only got a couple of years in, that's very impressive. Lois is from Georgia. She has been the Georgia area delegate until just recently, and is going to do a discussion, talk on relationships, which we could all certainly work on. Give you Lois P.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lois. Hi. That feels good to hear that. When I have been asked to speak or do discussions at other meetings before, I think a lot of times it turned out to be an ego trip, oh boy, they asked me, and this time it's really funny. It's more of a feeling of, I'd like to share, and sort of like the feeling you get when you go to a meeting and you feel like wanting to share something because you learned something and you want to let go, let somebody else hear about it. And that's the way it feels this time. So maybe higher power has put in some words in there that I need to hear also when I say them. This topic is relationships. And originally when I was asked on that, I thought, well, I don't know if I can talk that long about relationships. Why don't we have a discussion at the end of it, participation? And I thought, well, that's the way it's going to be, And then when I got here, the guy who does the tape said, it's kind of hard to get a discussion on a tape because then you have questions going back and forth and people don't know what the questions are when they're listening to the tape because you can't hear them. And he says, really, they want you to speak. And so I thought, shit. Because that means I really do have to say what I've got inside of me then, and not try to depend on everybody else for giving in those answers. But I got to thinking about relationships, and it's really funny. You say the word relationships to people, or tell me about relationships, and there's all kinds of relationships. But the first one that seems to come to mind to most of us that I talk to anyhow is like a spousal type, and really from being in the program, I've learned that there's a relationship between me and my higher power, which I must maintain on a daily basis, or else I lose everything else, and then there's a relationship between me and my husband. And then there's a relationship between me and my children. And I say that in plural, but I really mean there's a relationship between my son, and there's a relationship between me and my daughter. And then, there's the rest of my family. There's a relationship between me and my brother, and all of this, and between the friends that I have in the program. There are all kinds of relationships. And the thing that seems to happen to me and mine is that I have a tendency to place whatever motivation I have on something on other people. I know that, like I said at the beginning, if my relationship between me and my higher power is not maintained on a daily basis, everything else falls apart. And that is the one thing that I grabbed onto at the beginning of my program. I'm very lucky that when I came into the program, my husband was already in NA. He was working a program strongly, and he was getting involved in it, and I could see that he was getting involved in it as he was, compulsively. By nature, I'm a competitive person, so I began to involve myself as competitively in my program as he did in his. And it made me latch on to the steps and to the people in the program. And I think that brought me closer to a higher power that evolved into a loving, caring higher power that I have now that I didn't have before. Maybe I should start at the beginning of my own time in this world, and that is to go back to saying that I was born into a family of alcoholics. My father came from a long line of alcoholics, and my mother came from a long line of codependents. It was just, the nature of things that I came along right in there. From the very earliest, though, I looked around at my family, and I did not feel a part of. And that's the one thing that I see about me that I always thought was different from other people I met in the program, was that even if they were born into an addictive family, they felt they were like them and not like everybody else in the world. I felt I was different from my family and from the rest of the world. I'd go to school, and I felt so different from everybody else and thought I looked totally different from everybody else. I knew I had been dropped on my mother's doorstep. I had to be, because I was nowhere near like any of them. So I didn't make friends. I didn't see that I was similar. People were either better than I was or worse than I was, and we were not the same at all. If my voice shakes, it's because I'm nervous. You got that right. Okay. But it's okay. I'll get through it. I know that. Anyway, I didn't feel the same as everybody else. And I remember going to junior high and high school, and I had one person that I was very close to. And this one girl and I got along just beautifully. We'd try to go places together and do things. And at some point along in her teenage years, she started to get interested in boys, which was a normal thing for a girl being teenage, But my mother didn't think so. And I kind of believe now that maybe she thought that, or maybe she got into that because she wanted me to stay a child and maintain all that control, you know. Maybe that was part of it, I don't know. But she ended our relationship, and I had a big resentment against her for years that, you know, here was one friend that I really kept, and she sort of knocked it out from under me. I may go back and forth, and I'm going to do that right now because it's kind of nice to be here, and I feel so good about being here. And this is about relationships too, because we went traveling around this morning. We went driving all over the place, and we wanted to see some property on the Virginia side. And we looked at the property, and we saw it back and forth and walked around and stuff like this. And then we drove back, and we were driving back fairly late, and I was beginning to feel like, geez, I want to take a nap, and I want to do this, and I'm not going to be able to do that, and beginning to get all resentful, you know. But we arrived back here and got back about 3 or something like that, a little after 3. And I had some lunch over in the room there, and I thought, this is it. I have had enough, you know. And so I said, I'm going up to our room to eat my lunch. So I went up there, and I ate lunch, and then I thought, I need to take a shower. You know, it feels so good. So I took a shower, and it was all nice and hot. I almost stayed in there. It felt so good, you know. And while I'm in there, I hear my husband's voice coming in saying, Lois, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't hear the rest of it, but I knew he was in there. So finished my shower, got out, and what turned out was that he had dropped off our 8-year-old daughter in there while he went off to talk with somebody else in N.A. And I thought, this is what really gets me angry about these sort of things, is that I'll go somewhere and I'll have an appointment to do something. And so I'm trying to get ready for it. And then he drops this all on me. It's like, I must take care of all this. And remember last night I said I'm one of these people, I must take care of all this. I must do this. Well, it's there, you know, I must do this. And I thought, Jesus, you know. So I got myself ready, and I'm putting on the makeup, and I was getting ready to brush my hair. And my son comes in there, and he says, God, you look awful, Mom. I thought, get out of here. That's what I thought. Get out of here. I thought, I don't need to hear this. I know I look awful right now. Get out of here. And, you know, he kept trying to come back in there saying, I'm sorry. You don't look that bad. But, you know, I finished that, and I got to thinking about it. It so happens I had just read my horoscope in the paper. And it said something about, you know, instead of figuring out somebody else's intentions, look to your own motives, look long and hard at your own motives. And I thought, that's just what I needed to hear, you know. So I thought about my own motives then, too, of, you know, getting rid of everybody and all of this. And I thought, well, maybe it's because there's that perfection quality of me that wants to, you know, well, it's got to be perfect. I've got to get all ready. I've got to do this, have my little quiet time, you know, do this and that and the other, have it all perfect, and then I can go down there and speak, you know. And I guess it works out that I don't have to do any of that other than just be here, you know. And I'm beginning to learn those kind of things. But it doesn't feel good, you know, while I'm going through them. It's at the end of it that I look back and I go, this is good. This is nice. But anyway, I had to take that little digression and tell you about that. When I was living with my parents, I wanted to go to college. And I don't know why I wanted to go to college. I don't know whether it was to get an education or what. You know, I really don't. I don't remember my motives from back then, but I wanted to go. And I had a sister at the time who was married to somebody in the Navy, and they were going to be stationed in California in a place that was fairly close to a junior college. And the junior college would be less expensive to go to than some of the 4-year ones around us where I lived in New Orleans. And let me stop there for a moment, you know. In New Orleans, you people think of Mardi Gras and stuff like that in the French Quarter of New Orleans. It was an old city. It celebrates old ideas, and it celebrates antiques. And when I was growing up there, it seemed like everybody wanted to stay that way there. Nobody wanted any change of any sort. And I didn't want to stay there because of that. I wanted change. I wanted something different. I didn't know what I wanted, but I know I wanted something different from that place. And I've talked to other people who've grown up in alcoholic and addictive homes, and one of the things that seems to be common is the need to escape, the need to get out of wherever it was through one way or another. Some people get married, some people go to college, whatever. Mine was that my sister said, "Hey, we're moving close to a junior college. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Yes," and helped them drive across country. And I had never driven a car before, and they trusted me to drive with them. And I learned how to drive. In fact, we stopped off at some truck stop along the way, and a trucker came over and he says, "I know you. You're the girl that was holding the wheel like this, like it was going to fly away." And I said, "Yeah, that was me." I don't hold it like that anymore because I'm less afraid of things. But anyway, I moved to California, and I went to college, and everything seemed sort of like it was finally falling into place for me, But even there, there was addiction around me. My sister and my brother-in-law would go off for their little weekend binges, and they'd come home and fling ashtrays at one another, Their dog, I thought, was the most intelligent one of the whole family because, they'd drink and the dog wouldn't have anything to do with them. And I thought, that dog's intelligent. But lived with them for a while, and then I started to strike out on my own. I lived in another little town in California that had a 4-year university, and started going there. And I got a student loan to go there. I was going to be a teacher. And, I don't know if all of this talk is going to be strictly about relationships, but you'll probably pick up a lot about relationships because apparently that's been most of my trouble in life, is trying to live with other people. When I was going to this college, I thought, I want to be a high school art teacher because I remember going to high school and having art teachers that never understood that some of these kids wanted to do something with that. That there were kids in there that were talented, and they were not taking that course just to not take an academic course. They were in there because they wanted to learn something. And yet the high school art teachers I knew were mostly babysitters, And I thought, I don't want to do that. I want to be somebody who's going to be able to teach some of those kids. Maybe even make them stay in school so they can learn the other stuff. I wanted to save people. Let's put it down at that, So I went to a 4-year university. And in one of my anthropology classes, I met a person. Anthropology is the study of man. Well, there was one man I studied in there. During the 60s, I was not a part of the 60s. I heard something somewhere that said, if you remember the 60s, then you were not a part of the 60s. Well, I was not a part of the 60s because I didn't use any drugs. I didn't really drink a whole lot. My brother-in-law taught me how to drink so that I wouldn't get lost with other people when we'd go somewhere. I'd have my 1 or 2 drinks and that was it. So I didn't use any of the other stuff either. And I met this person. He played a guitar. He sang, and he sang quite good. He wasn't just playing it because that was the thing to do. He was intelligent, and he was artistic. He wrote poetry, and he wrote poetry to me. I have always been a romantic, dramatic person. life is either, oh my God, or oh my God, it's never, day to day. And this was a person that appealed to all of those senses, and we got to talking together, and we started meeting, and we got to seeing one another on dates. I don't know if you call them dates. Yeah, some of them were dates. His mother had a unique arrangement with her house. She had a pool house, a pool, and then a house. And his room was the pool house. So sometimes when we went on dates, his mom didn't even know I was there. And I was a very naive young person. I don't think I thought that babies come from kisses, but it was close. I was a very naive young person. And this person was somebody that I really liked a lot. And went so far as to, I love, that big word, it was a big word to me then. I mean, with this dramatic ability, it was, all or nothing, really. And so things turned out as they naturally do. I got pregnant. His mom still didn't know about this. And to parents who say, I should have known that my kid was using drugs. There was somebody, 12-year-old last night, something. I should have known my kid was using drugs. His mom never knew he used drugs like he did either. And it wasn't because she was not observant. It wasn't because she didn't love him. He hid things real well. And the disease such as it is will help you even hide it even better, But anyway, I was pregnant, and there was a decision to be made. Do we keep this baby? And it was really a matter of we, because we talked about it. I did not say it's your fault, and he didn't say it was my fault, which I'm very grateful for. We made a decision together that neither one of us had the ability to raise this child, either emotional or otherwise, and we didn't even put it in those kind of words. What came out that Greg now says is that he didn't know if he'd be alive in another year through his own disease, and mine was that I had seen a sister already get pregnant at 15, and at 25 come to resent that whole time. And I have too much respect. At the time, this is the way I put it to myself, I have too much respect for love to see it turn to hate, which I knew it could do. And so that was the decision we made. I'm glad we made that decision. I have my own views on abortion issues, which this is not the place to discuss that, and I'm not. But that's what we had to do at the time. Funny thing is, 6 months after that decision, after the baby was born and put up for adoption and all of this, we got married. And I bought a little button last night at the merchandise center that says something about everything happens in God's time or something. No, nothing is certain except change, and everything's right on schedule. And that's what happened, It was right on schedule for us to get married at that time, in 1970. 6 months after our marriage, Greg realized that his disease of addiction, and he knew it to be addiction because he had tried to stop. He had tried to stop, okay. He knew it was a disease that was killing him. He did not know how to stop it. He went to a program. My own disease was one of clinging to him and knowing somehow that he was going to come out on top and show me what to do. that was any relation for me at that time with anybody, was that you tell me what to do. I kind of laugh sometimes when I look at help wanted ads and they'll say self-starter on there. I was never, never that, because I wanted you to tell me what to do. I don't know whether it was out of fear that if I do wrong, if I make a mistake, then it'll be on you, or whatever it was. I think it was more along the lines of, I want to do it right. I want to do things right. I want to please people. I want to make everybody happy. And so if I listen to you, then I do it right. That was my relationship at this particular time, that he was starting into the program. So there I was waiting for him to show me the right way to do things, and the right way to go on things, the right way to live, because he seemed to know how to do it. The right way. Isn't that funny? Thinking an addict knows the right way to live. Think about that for a minute. But that's the way I felt at that time, was that he looked like he knew the right way to live. That he started going to meetings, and every night of the week, and there was a second meeting on Sunday that he used to go to. That's a lot of meetings. That's a lot of time away from me. And I've read in some of the NA literature that a lot of people there call it the disease of self-centeredness. Well, that's certainly what mine was too, and still is. I was waiting for all of these answers to come in to me from this other person and from this life, and he was going off to meetings instead of being with me. I didn't like that, and I wanted some answers. I didn't know where to get them. I went to his first meeting with him, though. I think I went to his first 3 meetings. His first meeting, he wore a suit and tie and everything. And he says now it's because he didn't want anybody there to know who he was. But he went there, and I was sitting right next to him. And I don't know why he brought me along at those things. It was sort of like we're a unit, And when they went around and said their names, this one said, "I'm Bill, and I'm an addict," and I'm John, and I'm an addict, and I'm Greg, and I'm an addict, and I said, "I'm his wife." That's what. Hello. That's what our relationship was, is that I'm his wife, And as I look back on it, I've heard other people say this, and it's true. I was somebody's daughter. I was somebody's sister. But I was never Lois. There was another button I almost bought last night that says, "The greatest possibility of becoming me in this world is me." And I like that, because I always wanted somebody else to be me, or me to be somebody else, And I really do have the greatest possibility of being me in this world, Greg went into the program, and he worked it just like he used drugs, compulsively. He had a slip after he came into the program. I don't remember much about what went on around the time of that slip, because I was still looking for other people for answers, and I was also looking at his 12 steps, and also being afraid that, well, gee whiz, if he gets well, will he leave me? I was looking at all of these things, so I don't remember that slip too well. I do remember him saying before that slip that when he would sit in the meetings, he would say, yes, he says, I've got a good life, I've got a good job, I've got a neat mother, and I've got a good wife, and I'm going to make it. Well, he had this slip. After the slip, I remember him saying, I'm in this for me, and I'm going to that meeting for me, and Lois, you stay home this time because I'm going by myself. And that was good. but I didn't know it at the time. You know, I didn't know that that was a good thing for both of us. I'm grateful now that he was so strong and compulsive in his program after that point, because it forced me to look at myself and to look at what was going on with me. It's interesting how the relationship between the two programs is sort of like that in a way to me, that I can see it now between Nar-Anon and NA. You know, there's this cooperation that they talk about, but the more I see NA saying to Nar-Anon service group, you handle it, the more I see Nar-Anon doing it. And it's the same thing at the beginning like that with me. He you know, I even told him at one point after I got into the program, you know, I really want you to make me happy today somehow. I don't know, but that's the feeling I have. I just want you to make me happy today. And he just bluntly said, I can't do that. You know, and that helped me, you know, and I didn't think so at the time. All of these things like this, it seems I learned after, you know, after going through them. I found Nar-Anon after an evening of running around in my head, you know, knowing that I wanted to talk to somebody, and Greg was off at a meeting, and I knew he wouldn't be back until like midnight, you know, after going coffee with everybody, and just going crazy inside of my head, wanting to talk to somebody, knowing that I was the only person in the world that was feeling this way. And, you know, wanting to run out into the apartment complex and yell. You know, I watch my little girl do these days, run outside and go, help! You know, I felt like running out and yelling something to get somebody's attention. And I didn't care who I talked to. And I guess that's what it took for me, was to break down this wall of wanting specific answers, you know, wanting the right answers, the perfect answers, and just saying, I want to talk to anybody. My husband told me about Nar-Anon, and I went to my first meeting. My first meeting was in a little church in Westwood, Los Angeles. And Westwood was like a university-type town. It's at UCLA practically. And the people that came to that meeting were dressed like people I saw in fashion magazines. I mean, the women, you know, at least one of the women had on a mink coat that was ankle length, and the other one had on an outfit that, geez, must have cost a whole year's salary for me, you know. And I thought, no, I don't know about this, you know, I don't think so. These people don't look like they have my answers, you know. I came in jeans and a T-shirt, you know. They don't look like they have my answers. I listened to their stories, though. And one of them, it's like the fellow said last night, you know, there's always somebody's story that's worse than yours. I heard this mother that night saying something about her daughter, but as she was lying in the hospital bed after her attempted suicide, saying to it, at least I did it myself, you know. And something in that reached me, because maybe I'd been trying to do things for other people too. I didn't even know of my own manipulations in the relationship with my husband or anybody else. But now that I can see how things went, now that I can see how my manipulations really work, I can look back and see that I used tears a whole lot. And I remember one time specifically living with my sister and brother-in-law when I came into their little restaurant, not theirs, but they were working there, came into there, and something had happened, and I wanted it to change somehow. So I was sitting in tears at this chair, and the manager came over, and he said, what happened? You know, and I told him, and he, you know, I only told him a little bit, you know, just a little bit, sort of as a hook, you know, and he said, well, it must have been really bad to make you cry, because I know you don't cry for nothing, you know. And that one specific example that I can remember, that I really used tears like that. And I know I did it other times. And I used my emotions like that with other people to manipulate. But I never knew it at the time. I didn't suspect it because that was the way I thought I could get things to work best. I did what I knew best, and that was what I knew. I went to that meeting anyhow, and I listened to the people, and I heard something there. And I realized that I had done that person an injustice by thinking, that I didn't belong there and all of this. And I went up to one of the people after the meeting and told them that I was sorry, because I had all these thoughts about what they were really like, and they weren't like that at all. And I think that was as a result of having gone to meetings with Greg, so I knew a little bit about those steps. And I knew that my thinking, like in the 10th step, I knew that my thinking, that I needed to apologize for that, for me, for my attitude. And after the meeting, I went home and I did steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the telephone. I mean, I'm an energetic gal, conscientious and the whole bit. I went home and did all 5 of those, just like that. And I knew I had done step 5 because I was crying on the phone to whoever it was. I don't even remember who it was now. But I went to another meeting after that, and I kept going. And I got involved in service work, too, in the program. The hardest thing at that time for me was to go to NA functions. Because if there was a dance, we'd go there, and there'd be all NA members there. I didn't see one Nar-Anon member. And I'd go there, and I'd stand at the wall, or I'd either stand next to Greg, sort of like we did when he went to his first meeting. I'd stand, if he was here, I was here. Real close. Because I was scared. I mean, there were a lot of bikers there, and the women looked like they got out of prison yesterday, and they looked mean. So I sort of stood on the sidelines at those things. They were hard for me to take at the time. And it took me a couple of years before I finally got to a point in my own recovery that said I can go up to anybody and say hello. And when I took the courage to do that, I was amazed. These people had a lot to give. And it made me see all of the people that I had met in high school that I would have loved to have as friends, but I was too afraid to go up to. And it made me understand that I could always start from this point on. There's no changing yesterday, but there's always starting right now and going on and being able to do that. And from that point, I did that. Started going to any NA member and going and saying hi and hugging them and stuff. And it was a neat experience after that. I got involved in service work in Nar-Anon, though, and I became secretary of the Los Angeles Intergroup. And business meetings were something else. You talk about your arguing in your families. Ooh, wait until you get to a business meeting sometimes. There was this one business meeting. Well, let me say this. There were a group of people that were involved in service work in Nar-Anon at the time, and they were individuals who wanted Nar-Anon to grow, and they wanted it to spread over the land like NA, and they wanted meetings all over the place, and they wanted it to happen. They wanted it to happen quickly. And there was no way to make it happen quickly, without doing some drastic things, instead of attraction, promoting things maybe a little bit and stuff like this. But they wanted to do something to help it grow. At the time, I was really involved with these people. I'm an enthusiastic person, and something like that really gets me going. People like that who are go-getters and that kind of thing got me going, too. At one particular business meeting, I was asked to make a motion. And I didn't realize what the motion said in it, and I don't remember what it said now. I did what people asked me to do at the time, and I did. I raised the motion, and geez, all these people started arguing. And before you knew it, after that meeting was over with, that particular group of people that wanted Nar-Anon to expand split from Nar-Anon and started their own fellowship. Well, as far as relationships go, I had been clinging to the fellowship that this was the place to be. That, as far as standing on level ground, this was the place to be. And it was comfortable. To have these people split off and form their own fellowship was more or less like having an earthquake underneath my feet at the time, underneath my recovery feet. It was like, where is the recovery you guys were talking about? If you guys can't handle it, how do you think I can? That's the way I felt. After that happened, I started going to another fellowship's meetings. And it was like I shut a door on this fellowship at the time. I just said, you guys, are not teaching me how to live. I need to live now. I need recovery. I need, something more than this. So there were more meetings of that other fellowship anyhow, I said to myself, And I started going to it, and I became a secretary of one of their groups. And I learned a lot in that fellowship. I'm very grateful for that fellowship. It taught me how to trust my higher power enough to drive on a freeway amidst big trucks and all kinds of things. It got me to a point beyond, driving along the road and thinking, what would happen if I turned my steering wheel quickly? Didn't think about that anymore. Was more comfortable with my own life. It taught me a lot. There came a point, about 10 years ago, when I looked at things. I was going to that other fellowship, and I suddenly realized that I was sharing in the meetings, but somehow I was not giving. There was a difference there. And I don't know how to explain that to people who haven't been through that other than to say that way. And that's that I was sharing in the meetings, but I wasn't giving. I wasn't giving back what I got. And I started, when we moved to Georgia, I found a very active Nar-Anon fellowship there. Particularly this little old lady whose name is also the same as mine. And she had remembered me from a convention years ago when I came there. And we got together and talked, and I started going to more meetings. And I suddenly realized that I was not giving because I needed to be here. Because this is where it is. I've heard NA members say that about going to their other fellowship and coming back and saying they couldn't give it back other than in NA. And I feel the same way. For some reason, I can't give it back other than here. When I go out to coffee after a Nar-Anon meeting, I feel a part of. I am so close to the people, it feels like I am a part of this fellowship. When I go to, after a meeting of that other fellowship to coffee, I don't feel that way. It's like I'm visiting, if you can understand that. So when we moved to Georgia, I got involved again in service work. I had heard tales over the years, because I had attended Nar-Anon meetings once and again, but I had heard tales over the years of how the central office was the mean ogre and things, and that, it was like you sent stuff there and nothing came back, and this and that and the other. And I knew the people involved in the central office, and I remember calling up that person one time and saying, hey, I'm moving to this one area. Do you know of any meetings in that area? And the person had such resentment that I was involved with that other group splitting from the fellowship at the beginning that she said, no, I can't tell you of any. And that hurt because, I had known this person before, and it was like no trust whatsoever. Like I was doing something to the fellowship and had done something at the time of that split, and I hadn't. I felt a resentment over that for a while, and I've worked through it, I think, by working and find a feeling of strength there and hope that it spreads out from there. And so that's what I've started to do. I became the Georgia area delegate mostly because I was there at the assembly meeting, and the other people had been elected as chairperson and this and that and the other, and I knew the central office anyway, so what the heck. And it's amazing, the first time that person in the central office and I met at the first conference. And we did have a conference, by the way. You guys probably already know about that, a World Service Conference in 88. And then we had another one last year. The first time we met at that first one, though, we gave each other a big hug, and she was okay. It was like she had forgotten some of the stuff and started trusting me. But as far as, it's a funny thing about when you talk about relationships, I can tell you my story like I've done a little bit of. There's more to it probably. And if I sit it with you on a one-to-one, I probably remember a heck of a lot more than I do standing up here because I get scared. But it's funny when you talk about relationships, it's really more of right now, of people with you right now, whether they be friends or relatives, whatever, loved ones, right now rather than in the past or in the future. Right now, my relationship with my higher power is stronger than it's ever been. A few weeks ago, I went through a period of desperation and a feeling of anger and resentment at this higher power, because I'm one of these people who I feel, when I first came into the program, I figured all I had to do was turn my life over to my higher power and just go on. And I know I relate a lot of things to driving, but maybe that's because all my emotions come out then, I don't know. But, I figured that when I first came into the program, it was like I turned my will and my life over to my higher power, and it's like setting it on cruise control. You just go on. But I'm finding out now it's not like that at all. That I turn my will and my life over to my higher power, but I must do it on a daily basis because things happen and because I need reinforcement. Because I need something along the way. I am a result-oriented person. Somebody told me once when I walk, when I'm walking around the block, I can't walk aimlessly. I walk like I have a destination in mind, and I drive the same way. And I'm real result-oriented, and I'm that way with my higher power. When I turn my will and my life over, it's for a specific purpose, God. I've turned it over for a specific purpose. Let's see it happen. And recently what's happened is that we've just been going along and nothing's happened. No results have shown themselves along the way. And I got to this point of real desperation and real resentment that, higher power, this is your fault. I can't do anything about it. And whether it was surrender, I had been praying for surrender, or what. A couple of weeks ago, I got to this point of trying to enjoy the right now. And I mean the right now. I mean touching myself and going, I'm wearing clothes that look nice. I feel pretty good. You know, my hair is combed. I had something to eat. I'm comfortable. And living like that for like a week or so, learning to look at days on a daily basis like that, and being happy for things like that today. And because our finances were such that, you know, I didn't know whether the rent would be paid or the car payment would be paid or anything else would be paid, whether we would be sitting out on the street. And I got to living in that day to day and started to trust and surrender the results. And I learned something from somebody in the program in Georgia, what she would say about writing bills. My thing is, I don't write bills unless I have money to pay them, you know. So they sit there and pile up, and I don't want to look at them, you know. And she told me, she said, well, I'll tell you a secret that I do, she says, is that I write them in the morning, you know, when it's nice and bright outside, and then go through the rest of my day. Because if I write them in the morning, it seems a little bit nicer, it seems a little bit brighter, I don't get as down. So I did that, and I went further. I do a little meditation first. Sat there and prayed and surrendered and turned it over, turned the results over. You know, said, I am writing these down, I am surrendering the ability to pay them. And just do it that way, and so on. And then last week, one of these things happened, you know. We went to a tax consultant, and I had done our taxes, and I knew that we were getting such and such from the federal, and we were getting this little bit from the state. And I thought, they can't tell me anything new that I don't already know. You know, I've got it down. We're just going to be paying them some money just to send us the stuff back quicker. And that's the way I felt. I mean, that resentment, that bitterness was still sitting there. Even though, you know, I got to the point of surrendering all that bitterness was still sitting there. And we went to them, and the guy wrote it out, and he said, oh, well, you get double this amount back from the federal. And, oh, look at here, you did the wrong form on the state. You get triple that amount from the state. And I thought, you know, when we left there, we were able to pay this bill and that bill and that bill. And I just said, thank you, God, for giving me a result. You know, I didn't know I needed one that desperately, but thank you. And I know now that I can't ever, if somebody else said that last night, you know, I got through it before when I was as sick as I was. Well, gee whiz, you know, I'm a lot better now. And it's true. You know, we got through it. And I'm really grateful. You know, it's higher power, that relationship with that higher power has changed through the years, but it's stronger than it ever was before for me. I can really, you know, really count on knowing that I'm going to be okay tomorrow. You know, and that feels really good. And then as far as my relationship with my spouse, you know, I think it's probably stronger than it was at the beginning of our program. And maybe it's because at the beginning, like I said, I kept thinking, well, if he gets well, is he going to leave me? Because, hey, I saw all these pretty shapely looking young females in NA, you know, and is he going to leave me? And at that time, see, I was raised in, I don't know if it's a Southern tradition or what, but I do know that my mother stayed married to my father through thick and thin. I mean, stubbornness, you know, self-will, yeah. And I thought, well, what, you know, can you stay married without love, though? You know, or what? And it suddenly occurred to me that I'd go to a meeting and people would hug me. That must mean that I'm okay, that I'm lovable somewhere, because these people would come up to me and hug me and say hello. And at the end of the meeting, they'd hold hands and they'd hug me then. And I thought, well, if they accept me, I must be okay somehow. And I got to thinking further about it and working along a little further in talking to other people and realized I'm a lovable person, and if he left me, I could find somebody else because I'm lovable. And at that point, I let that go. It was like, at the time, it was a feeling so strong of letting go. It was like, when you're on a roller coaster and they have a bar that comes across that you can hold on to. It was like knowing that he was not going to leave me was like that safety bar. And I was letting go of it, and it was okay. And from that point on, I think we left each other grow in our own program. He went to his meetings, and I went to mine. And we were both part of our own program. I did not try to be his sponsor, and I wouldn't let him be mine. Did I say that right? Yeah. He would talk to me, but he never shared his emotions with the people around him anyhow very easily. And he shared them more with NA members, and I let him go to do that. If something I saw was bugging him, I tried to keep my mouth shut and not say anything, because I knew sooner or later it was going to bug him, and he was going to go talk to somebody about it, if I could keep my mouth shut long enough. And same for me. I found a couple of times that I have shared something with him that was really something very internal to me and very personal, that he didn't give me the response I needed. And if I shared it with a Nar-Anon member first, I got the response that I needed. It may have been the same words that he used, but somehow it wasn't the same response, And I got that from a Nar-Anon member, and so I do that a whole lot now. Is when I feel something very strongly, spiritually or emotionally, I'll share it with a Nar-Anon member, and then I'll share it with him if I choose to. And with my children, we didn't have children when we first came into this program. We waited 6 years to have a child in the program. And I know now that we thought at the time 6 years was long enough, to have some recovery behind us, that, we'd know what to do on things, and it wasn't. The sneaky little disease, So I look at both children, and I see a codependent and an addict growing up there. But it's funny, sometimes they interchange. Sometimes I think it's the boy, and then I'll look over here, and all of a sudden it's the girl. And then it goes back and forth, and that's all right. There are some things that are really strong about them both, too. Lori, for instance, at 8 years old, shares some things that I was too afraid to talk about when I was a kid. At one point, we were but disciplining her brother about something that he had done. And we raised our voices. And Lori leaned over to me and she said, "Somehow I think it's my fault." And I thought, God, that's real codependent, But she said it. When I was a kid, or even now when I feel that way, it's hard to say something about it. And she said something about it. So I thought, excuse me, I am getting over a cold. So I thought, even though they both have both of those qualities, they also have a lot of other answers that are in them from watching people around them that are recovering and being around them. I've learned a lot from them my son, when he was real little, I get obsessive reading books. I don't know how you can't. I mean, you open a book and, oh, God, you go through it. And I was obsessively reading this one book, and he was trying to get my attention, and he pulled my arm a couple of times, and I'd say, shh, not now, later, And finally he said, gee, Mom, even little puppies need attention, And I thought, that's just what I needed. It pulled me right out of it, If I can listen to them sometimes. I don't need water, by the way. That is just from a cold. And it's getting a lot better. Maybe I'm getting to the end of what I'm supposed to say is what it amounts to. But I've got one more relationship message to talk about. And that's the relationship between me and you and people in the fellowship. And that is that I learn a lot more from you than I learn from my own thoughts. If I can stay out of them, where I used to think I could find the answers, if I can stay out of them and listen to what you're saying and feel the love that you have to give and try to give some of it back, then, I'm a part of again. This fellowship has given me a feeling that I never had in my whole life other than, now, and that's feeling a part of something bigger than I am and loving it. You were saying about the Georgia delegate. Where are you? There you are. Yeah. And I enjoyed being part of that, carrying the message from my area to the World Service Conference. This past conference, I had to carry the message that my area was upset. And I didn't like giving that message because I had already sort of halfway made amends with that person in the central office. And I thought, she's not going to like this message, And I gave it anyway, though, because it was not my message. It was from my whole area, and it needed to be heard. I enjoy being a part of that, and I still am kind of a part of things there by going to meetings and being part of the fellowship at large. I'm part of the literature committee, the World Service Conference Literature Committee, and they really are working on literature. They have a lot of stuff in there. They have to proofread it all, and like anything else involving human beings, there's always something that's going to happen to stop the stuff from flowing smoothly. And that's what happened this last time. They were working on some pamphlets and stuff, and one person didn't have the time to get it through, and so now it's stopped, and this is after a year. So these things happen, but it is working on it. They are working on it. I found out that there is one phrase that I saw in that other fellowship policies, and it says something about there must be mutual respect to create harmony. And I thought that is absolutely true, whether it be from the World Service Office to the groups or whether it be to us personally. There must be mutual respect. And that's the way I feel with my family and the people around me. And I'm learning to give that respect to others and to let go of some of what I think that are the reasons for what they're doing. Like my little horoscope said today, look long and hard at my own motives, instead of thinking of what are their intentions. My analogies with the driving, instead of looking at this person and saying, well, they have their stoplights on, are they going to turn right or are they going to turn left? They're stopping. Just stop. Not try to figure people out. just learn to live my own life through the principles I've learned in this program. And I thank you all for letting me share some things with you. And I hope you've heard something there about relationships. I've hoped you've heard something about my own life. I tried to be as honest as possible, warts and all, coughs and all. So there it is. Love you. Thank you.
All I'm standing up here to do is to tell you, for those of you from the Raleigh area who know Frank R., there's a card up here if you want to send this off to him in Saudi Arabia, where it looks like he's going to be for a little bit longer yet. It's up on this table right here. Otherwise, you may go wherever you choose to go. You are invited, as I understand, to attend the NA banquet if you want to check for a ticket to that. There's an open NA meeting tonight, and 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? Okay, continental breakfast, 9 o'clock. Please come hungry. We have lots of food. And then there will be a spiritual meeting following that. Thank you all for coming.